Welcome to, this is Thursday, June 8th, 2023, Budget and Finance Subcommittee meeting. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 29, 2023 order extending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GL, Chapter 30A, Section 20 per Open Meeting Law. Any member of the public may make an audio or video recording of this meeting. And so I'll do a roll call and call to order. Secretary Ekstrom or Chair Ekstrom, I am here. Member Johnson-Mousad?
Here.
Vice Chair Martini?
Here.
We are all present. And is there any public comment today? I don't see anyone but just us chickens. So I'm going to assume there's no public comment. If for whatever reason I've missed someone or you're on the phone, please do let us know. And going right into updates and discussion on FY24 budget. Andy or Christine, you want to take it away?
Okay. So I will share my screen if that works, if I can find it. Share screen. Andy? If I make you co-host, can you pull up the FY24 budget template from yesterday?
Yep.
My my computer does not want to share that document for some reason.
Do you dislocate your shoulder, Andy?
Fractured my humerus.
Excellent. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Ouch.
Yeah. Okay. So given the
Hang on a second here. I'm gonna make this bigger. I don't know if
Yes, that would be great.
yeah, I certainly would appreciate it. Okay, so I will share sort of the thought. Oh, almost, Andy. Okay, so given the change in the budget from the City Council, where they reallocated just over $1.1 million to the school department, Andy and Karen and I sat and went through the budget, and basically at this point, as I've said ad nauseum, we really need to get some of our staff to be funded out of the local and not so many out of the grants. So given that you folks as a subcommittee had talked about prioritizing adding in a 504 coordinator and having the full-time ETL at the early childhood because of compliance issues, we started there by, you know, our recommendations would be to add in to the FY24 budget 504 coordinator, to add in to the budget the full-time ETL, which means we would basically need to hire a new preschool teacher because one of our current staff has been functioning as a part-time ETL and, you know, doing a nice job. So the hope would be that they could be reassigned to be a full-time ETL. Then some of the other things based on the administrative recommendations that we did is basically went through the cut list and took some things off. And these are solely administrative suggestions. Obviously, you folks as the committee have the final, but I'll share what we sort of put back, so to speak, and then what we moved into the grant. So we put back the middle school extracurricular things that we had reduced. We put back middle school athletics. We left in the budget for next year an additional grade 1 teacher So originally we had added into the budget 2 extra first grade teachers because we have 3 kindergartens at Federal and Newton, and we expected them to go to 3 first grades and us needing to keep 3 kindergartens in both of those schools. Then as we moved through the budget process, our numbers for kindergarten were not shaking out that we would need 3 in each of those schools. So 2 of the kindergarten teachers basically were rolling up to fill the new first grades. However, now we have our students who are homeless that are moving in. Darlene has gotten a few students at kindergarten already through that, through the families at the Days Inn. So as a precautionary measure, we have left 1 additional teaching position in the budget. We may not at the end of the day require it, but it felt like it was prudent to assume we would, and then have the ability to not fill it if the numbers for kindergarten don't materialize. I hope that makes sense. Good so far?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Can I ask you a question related
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah.
I'm sure the answer is we don't know, but
Okay.
is there any sort of, has the state said these people will be here X amount of time?
So far, no. But we have another meeting. The city department heads have another meeting with the state folks this afternoon. I don't know if we'll get additional information, but they had originally spoken to the fact that the state was still trying to find housing options in some other more southerly Massachusetts places in Hampden County, because some of the families here have family in that geographical area. So some families may move, but though I'll be honest, the bulk of the families who've moved in so far do not have school-age children.
Okay.
So it's also not necessarily known if the families who would move are ones that have children.
Right. Well, and of course the hopes is that they'll find themselves in different situations and not have to be in the hotel at all. So
well, there's that. Yes. So anyway, the other thing that we left in the budget, just for, I didn't check that box. That we left in the budget for sake of conversation was Strings for Kids. I had originally suggested to the committee to cut it. I know that there was a lot of public opinion about that we should have it. So I, for the sake of conversation, put it back into the budget for FY24. But I do want to share, before we move on to what we've sort of tentatively suggested we move into the grant, I do want to share that in conversation, well, it wasn't conversation, I asked the principals to get data about how many students we had participating in Strings for Kids. We have 18 right now. Next year's budgeted amount for us to contribute to Strings for Kids is $26,500, meaning the school district is contributing over $1,000 per pupil to Strings for Kids. And I know often the conversation that is had is that, well, this program provides the opportunity for music lessons, violin, cello, for students who wouldn't otherwise have access. So I just want to share that only 27% of the students currently participating would be eligible for free and reduced lunch. So, my perception coming into the district is that the district began subsidizing the program because it provided a resource for our students who were falling into the low income designation. But I just want to share that that's not the bulk of our students. Okay, so does anybody have questions about the things that we might suggest the committee consider putting back into the budget from the original potential reduction list?
why don't we keep going? I think that Kate is going to have some thoughts about strings for kids, but maybe let's come back to that discussion. Does that sound good with you, Kate?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going then.
Okay, so the document, so what happened is City Council reallocated just over $1.1 million, as you know. So then when we put back into the budget, the positions that I talked about, the first grade or kindergarten teacher, the ETL, the 504 coordinator, and the strings for kids amounts, we were able to reallocate. All right, Andy, you're going to have to scroll and get me that number of what. It was just over $800,000 that we were able to take away. There it is, $185,202 is now, that's not all of Easter money that we're using. That is all that is left of the extra million that we were using. So we had some positions that we knew were grant funded, have been grant funded from the get-go, and that we intended to be grant funded. Then we had to add an additional $1 million from ESER 3 to offset salaries because of the budget reduction. We want to get as many of those extra $1 million of salaries into the local. So we are now only using 185,000 of that extra $1 million. And some of the things that we put into the grant to use that funding are, all right, Andy, you have to scroll up so that I can sort of reflect, see all the numbers. I can tell you while Andy's looking, we put all of the field trip transportation into ESER 3. Not that we want that to go away when the grant is over, but it's a non-person thing that we will have to reconsider funding for FY25. We have a budget line for maintenance of Green River because it's still a school building at this point. We have to maintain the security system. We have to maintain the server. So we put that $6,000 into ESER 3. We took Karen's textbook line and put that into ESER 3. In the future, we will need textbooks on an ongoing basis, but given the age of the textbooks that we keep, we feel that that's a reasonable capital request when the need comes up. So, but for FY24, it's been moved into the grant. We also moved all of the technology instructional materials, which is basically all the online instructional materials, moved those into the grant, and moved curriculum and instruction supplies. So those three lines are about $460,000, give or take. We also moved, scroll down.
I'm sorry, Christine, can you say that one again?
So yes, basically I can summarize a little better. Karen has three lines: textbooks, technological instructional supplies, so our online subscriptions, and then supplies like our consumables, you know, consumable workbooks, things like that. Mm-hmm. For FY24, we're assuming funding all of those in the grant.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we'll have to relook at funding those going forward, but at least they're not people.
It's these three lines here that if you see the.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Kate, it's the 169.05. Okay.
Yeah. I see what you're talking about. Thank you.
Sure.
Geez, Karen, you're expensive.
Very expensive.
Our students need that.
Sure. Of course they do, nonetheless.
Let I'm trying to think, Andy, of what else we put in there. We put about $35,000 worth of facilities repairs into the grant. So really, we looked at offsetting the grant funds. We swapped it from salaries to stuff. Again, a lot of that stuff is going to have to get funded going forward. Oh, we also increased the amount of technology that was funded out of the grant. Originally, when we looked at the IT line for hardware, software, all of that, we had assumed about 175,000 of that would come out of ESER 3. We've upped that to just over 300,000 coming out of ESER 3. And then we have 500,000 that's coming out of another. No, we already left that in ESER 3. We just upped the amount of technology coming out of the grant instead of some of it out of local and some of it out of the grant. So really offsetting the 815,000 from salaries to stuff. And then we put that amount of salaries back into the local budget. This was a very, I don't necessarily know if I'm doing a good job articulating this swap well, but we took the local money we got back, we're paying people with it, and all of that amount of grant money, now we're paying for stuff with it. That's the short end.
And that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So I have a question that I'm not really seeing in here, but we've talked about security, and it was one of those things that we definitely were not going to be cutting because there was going to be, because we had security needs. So I'm curious, is it that we will be able to enhance our security measures? Or is the plan to still keep it at the level it was at? I don't know if you made any changes just administratively to security, meaning we got this level of security stuff and that's what we're going to keep.
What we're going to do is, so Andy and Karen and I look at our grants like continually. We did not. So we originally had a plan for allocating the ESER 2 and 3 funds. As we now get to the end of the fiscal year, we will reevaluate the expenses in all of the grants. If we are able to increase some of what we've allocated toward the security upgrade, I'm certainly happy to do that. We're working with someone who's helping us do the specs for the security system. We still have to go out to bid. So I'd like to assume a little bit of additional funding just in case the bids come in. You know how it always works. We budget for a certain amount, and then once the bids actually come in, there is potential for it to be a little bit higher. So we're reevaluating the amount we have in all the grants. But I definitely did not reduce what we had anticipated doing to upgrade the security systems.
Right. Well, and I leave that at your discretion. You're much more of an expert at that than I assume anyone on the school committee is. And you know, I don't know if we need anything enhanced. It was just something that, because we talked about security for or not so many times, but it's sort of in depth as we had, I thought it might be a question to ask.
Oh yeah, no, we're definitely, that is still on the docket. I didn't speak to everything that we've anticipated in the grant. I'm only trying to, I guess, outline some of the changes that we made.
Sure.
More so the things that we've put into the grant that will need to be about, you know, we'll need to think about what we do with them for 25.
Right. I don't know that I don't know that you can do textbooks as a capital request. The last, and I'm sure you would know this better than I, but the last discussion that I heard about funding from capital was that they had to be a 30-year loan or something like that. Like,
Andy, I know you can better than I can outline the criteria for
Well, I
capital.
don't know it off the top of my head, but there are arguments to be made as far as it's things like there's a dollar threshold and a useful life of greater than, and normally in other communities like 5 years or 10 years. And honestly, we use our textbooks for greater than the time period. So we were saying in our discussions we've had that an argument could be made that textbook purchases almost could be treated very similarly to computer replacement cycles. And then, because they're one time, the collective amount would be greater than their threshold that they have for both the collective and individual amount per the capital planning committee. And the useful life is also, it checks off all the boxes. So understanding that it might not be necessarily, when we think of a textbook, it doesn't necessarily come to mind as capital, but
yeah.
An argument could be made, I guess, and we're thinking that we could.
All right, and so then let me ask this, and Karen, this is probably going to be a question more for you, and I'm going to stumble my way through this, but is it that the information being taught, sort of given lens of social equity and things like that, is it that textbooks are being changed and their focus is changing so that we would need to buy new textbooks sooner than we typically would?
I don't know if that's the foundation of it though, but they do have to keep up with standards and when the state adopts new standards. So, we try to keep in line with that and align what the textbook publishing date is, because often they don't match. There is also the push for high quality instructional materials that are culturally responsive now, and that also weighs in on how we would like to adopt newer materials so that those needs are being met as well. But we obviously have a lot of work to do there because many of our content areas are utilizing outdated resources. We've been doing a lot of work in the last year and a half, as you know, but we have a long way to go with other content areas besides ELA and math.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, our biology textbooks, if I'm not mistaken, Karen, are more than 10 years old. So
yes, they are.
Science changes a little more rapidly than every 10 years. And whether we like it or not, and I appreciate that, people have feelings about MCAS, we're still required, our kids are still required to pass to graduate. So we really need to give them materials that have current information in them.
Glenn, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I apologize. I have a phone call that's coming in around 10:30, so I may need to hop off. But part of what I'm thinking about, I would like to give the community a picture of what that $365K that the mayor withdrew from the school's budget, what that really means to the community in terms of things we won't be able to do. Or things that we can do this year because we have ESSER funds, but we won't have in the future. Are there items on this list of kind of non-staff stuff that we're moving, we're keeping in the budget using the ESSER funds, but that we don't think that a capital request will compensate for in the FY25 budget?
Well, I think the issue for me is that, and Andy, you yell, but I think the issue for me is that if we had any additional funds that we got, to me, would be used to offset more of the salaries that are being paid for out of the grant. Yeah. So that's really the crux of it, is that, for example, we have $185,000 worth of staff still being funded out of ESSER that we did not expect to be. So the $365,000 worth of financial orders being withdrawn just leaves that $185,000 worth of staff in a precarious position for FY25. That's to me more the point for discussion, not so much the stuff we're paying for out of the grant.
Great. And where are those $185,000 in this grant on this spreadsheet?
They're represented in one line on it's actually put on the sick leave buyback line, Glenn.
Okay.
We have not yet allocated that. We haven't assigned particular staff people's salaries to the grant yet.
Yeah.
We'll need to look at it and say, honestly, you know, in FY25, this position may or may not be something that we continue, and so we'll move it into the grant. We have not done that yet.
And what would be an average teacher's salary, would you say?
Well, we have a new salary scale, which I have not internalized. What I can tell you is we budgeted for the 504 coordinator in the FY24 budget. We used master's step 12, which is the highest step, and that is 80,000. Master's step 10 would be 76,000 and change. You know, a brand new teacher would be closer to 50. So it really depends the position.
Sure.
So.
Great, thank you. Very helpful.
Sorry, I don't have the new salary scale as familiar off the top of my head as.
Oh, that's okay. That gives me the information I need. Thank you.
Sure. Susan, anything else or?
Well, Kate, you want to circle back to String for Kids?
Yeah, I do. I have I have like a lot of questions about the differences in certain lines in the budget, but I don't want to. I know Glenn might have to go, so maybe we should talk about music first. So, I mean, I've just been thinking this is about much more than Strings for Kids for me. I really appreciate Strings for Kids and I want it to stay. And there are obviously a lot of people who care about that. And also I think that in terms of access for families who might not otherwise be able to afford it, I think that you know, our guidelines, our federal guidelines for what constitutes low income are very low and not really realistic for most families. So probably a lot of the families involved in this program would have a pretty hard time involving their child in music without it. So I think it's important, but I have a bigger concern, which is the Greenfield music program in general is really just hobbling along. The way I see it is more like a ghost of a music program than an actual music program. I would like to know what it would cost to have a basic, well-rounded music program. And by that, I mean having an elementary chorus program and band program in each elementary school, having the same in the middle school and high school, but with some other basic options like jazz band and show choir and marching band. I would like to know, like, what would be the price tag on that, and what is our kind of long-term vision? Because we've talked before about not having a pipeline or an opportunity of kids who are coming in with foundational skills in music into the upper grades to then fill a music program and choose those as electives and what have you. So those are my general thoughts.
Okay, so to have what you describe, we have music teachers at the elementaries already, like general music. I would say we would need to reinstate our 4th grade band teacher, which we, to get down to a reasonable budget. That was a position that is not in the budget, but you know, that's something that we would need to have. We would need to have a full-time teacher at the middle school, full-time teacher at the high school. But we'd also have to have students who enroll in the courses. And that is one of the big reasons that the position, we lost a music teacher at our middle school last year. At the end of last year, the teacher had gotten a different teaching certification and had transferred into a math position. But because we had so few students who had enrolled in the music courses at the high school, I made the decision to reassign that music teacher to cover both middle school and high school. So it's somewhat of an issue, Kate, where we had a teacher and no one or not a lot of students enrolling in the courses. So it's sort of a catch-22. You know, we have, and I know we heard from our student rep at one point saying a lot of his friends were talking to him about they want the music courses, but they had not signed up. So, you know, I would say if the school committee is going to put resources behind really developing, enriching the music program, we would need to put the band teacher back and somehow create some structure at the middle school level to get kids interested in, you know, you're talking about concert performances, that kind of thing. We'd need a feeder program. I don't know that just staffing the high school is going to do that, because if they haven't had the instruction leading up to that, they may not be looking to do that.
Right. No, I mean, it seems like this would need to be a long-term project and starting at the elementary level.
Yes,
we nixed elementary chorus a while back, and so we don't have students developing the same level of interest that they might have if they were participating in that. I wonder about the general music classes in the elementary schools. My understanding is, and I might be wrong because I don't have direct information about it, but my understanding is that we had lost the music teacher for Newton School, and it was being taught by a substitute for a while, and now it's being taught by a different substitute. Is that what? How do we have an actual music teacher whose profession that is in the elementary schools, and how many?
Yes, and we had someone who left in the middle of last year, and we were not able to refill it. But that is the position that Ollie McFadden transferred into. He was the 4th grade band teacher, and he transferred into that general music position at the elementary. So yes, for next year, we will have 2 licensed music teachers at the elementary level.
And so all of the elementary music classes will be being taught by staff teachers and not by substitutes.
Well, based on today's information, yes.
Okay, so the as the budget we're looking at right now, that does not include a band teacher for 4th grade.
It doesn't,
right?
It doesn't.
So what that means is that any student throughout the district who wanted to participate and learn how to do band or how to play an instrument, excuse me, is unable to do that because that isn't in our budget. However, we have 18 students that we pay more than $1,000 per student so that they can take part in a program that isn't part of our internal curriculum.
Yes.
That's a true statement?
Yes.
Okay.
I also want to clarify that our chorus, only federal apparently had chorus, and that's been gone for a few years. That is not a recent change to the, that's not a recent change to the budget.
So
Do we own musical equipment in terms of instruments that fourth graders would play in band?
We do.
And where is it and what kind of condition is it in? And I'm assuming it would need some investment.
No, they're all across the elementary, and we've been investing in repairs and updates for the past at least 2 years while I've been here. We've been investing in maintaining our instruments.
I would hate for that to go to waste.
I would too.
So I have something that I guess is a roundabout question, which big surprise. So the music teacher that is at the high school is also the music teacher that is at the middle school. Some of that is in part due to lack of interest in music classes.
I would probably better describe it as lack of enrollment.
Okay. So maybe this is a better question for the full committee under new business or something. I guess I'm curious how it is that students know about electives. Like, do we do, and maybe this is more at the high school or at the middle school, do we do an elective fair, or is there a sheet that describes here are some possible electives and then what those classes would equate to, or anything like that?
Yeah.
There is.
So at the high school, we have the program of studies. All courses are listed in there, and generally what happens is students are given the opportunity to sign up for courses that they would be interested in. And then if we hit a reasonable threshold for a course, then it gets added into the schedule. At the middle school, yeah.
Are there descriptors for those courses? Like if it says, I don't know, art or clay, or I'm making these things up, obviously. Is there a more expanded descriptor of what the class would be about?
I assume, Karen, you would be more versed in the high school course catalog than I would be.
So guidance does present the program of studies and goes through it with all students before they actually have to go on the computer and select. And in each course selection, there is a paragraph descriptor. It discusses what the class entails. It discusses the credits you would receive for taking such class, any prerequisites that would be needed, and then what the progression after such course would be. So, you know, ceramics 1 gives you the foundation, and then there's a paragraph on what you would do to learn there, and then it would move, you know, and it will say you can go on to ceramics 2 or ceramics hand building, and they're all listed in, you know, categories based on content.
Okay. So if there was something like, I don't know, electronic music,
Correct.
And all of that would be related to synthesizers or guitars. I don't know. Clearly, I'm not a music expert in this, but there would be a descriptor of what that class would entail.
Yeah, I mean, they used to teach guitar, I think it was called Guitar Band on the Mac Lab, and they would do everything online and synthesize music based on computer technology. So yeah, there's always a description, and, you know, what interests kids based on that description is how they select those electives. But they have to have room in their schedule, which is another component of it. And with other requirements, they only have 7 course selections per student. So, you know, there's always that nature of not everything will fit into your schedule the way you would like it based upon what you actually have to take versus electives you want to take.
Right.
That kind of segues into my next question, Karen, which is that what currently exists for extracurricular after school activities in music through GHS? I mean, through GPS in general.
After school music?
Yes. Is there anything?
Well,
I don't know about, I can speak to when I was there. I don't know if it's still happening this year, but jazz band was happening after school in the past, but I'm not sure if it actually is a quote unquote club, or if they do in the actual band class, if the jazz band practices together in band, quote unquote.
Right. And the leadership of that or anything in that would probably be down to the shared teacher between GMS and GHS and their ability and interest in doing that.
Anything after school would have to be that the staff person is applying for stipend positions that we post.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is, I mean, that's the case for any of our extracurricular activities, where all of those run if we have a staff person who applies for the stipend position. I mean, certainly Mr. Sypek does practices for the band that currently exists, and, you know, they have the opportunities. We all saw them. We all saw them at graduation. So there's, you know, they do some things outside of school for sure as part of the regular band. I think for me, I'm quite happy if we enhance our music program in the district. And Kate, I appreciate that you said it's not a one-year thing. It certainly wouldn't be. And that's a decision for the committee. You know, we can, if we want to put the 4th grade bands teacher back in, we certainly can do that. We would just then have to, you know, make a decision about something else.
Right. I mean, it doesn't make sense to build the whole machine if you don't have the fundamental parts. I think it would make probably the most sense to invest at the elementary level more at this stage and try to build something longer term. I mean, obviously it's a conversation for the entire committee, but for my part, I would like to prioritize 4th grade band, and I would like to see an elementary chorus program. Those just seem like really basic nuts and bolts to having any chance of having a robust music program long term. So
how do you envision elementary chorus?
Each elementary school having a chorus. I don't know exactly all of the ropes and nuts and bolts of how that should work, but
no, I guess I'm asking you, like, to do a chorus that would be like, we have to talk about whether that's instead of general music. If it's in addition, then students would be missing core academic time, or if it's an outside of school option that we provide at the elementary level, that's a choice for sure, then we would need to consider, do we offer transportation for our students? So there are just some pieces. I guess that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
the logistics behind it would influence. If it's a stipend position and we just have to worry about the late bus, that's a very different scenario than if you were envisioning like a full-time teacher going between the 3 buildings offering chorus. So
if we have the ability to offer it as a stipend position after school and fund a late bus for students who are interested in doing it, that would be fabulous, you know, but I'm talking about the bigger picture, which is my concerns about the kind of frailty of the music program and what the most important first next steps would be to making it stronger. So
Kate, let me ask you this. If making the music offerings that we have at the elementary level more robust meant cutting strings for kids, would you still be interested? I'm devil's advocate.
Strings for kids pulls on your heartstrings, no pun intended. And I think it's a wonderful program, but to me, the Greenfield Public Schools music program is more important.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And not that I think it should be an either or.
Right.
Either. I mean, but if I were made to choose one or the other, I would be picking the music program within the school.
Okay.
So I think the committee would just need to make the decision about whether we do want to offer the 4th grade band again, which is certainly I think that is a reasonable thought that would be a feeder program to the band at the middle school. Kate, doing a stipend for an after-school chorus is a much lighter lift, obviously, than doing a teacher. I think if no one objects, I'd like to think about how we could do that logistically to have all 3, I don't know that we're going to get 3 different people to do a stipend position at each of the elementaries. And
well, yeah, so do you have to get a bus to pick up the kids that are interested in chorus and have them all taken to one centralized location?
Well, exactly. So we need to look at the logistics, but so that's something we would need to think about.
Right. Could you maybe explore some possibilities and bring that back?
I can. Yeah.
That would be great.
Kate, are you asking for the superintendent to have that ready for the full committee?
That's pretty short for next week. But
thank you. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah, but maybe over the summer. I mean, I don't know. What's a reasonable amount of time for you, Christine?
I don't know. Depends. I mean, if we're talking about a stipend position, I think the biggest issue is going to be what can we do in terms of transportation, because otherwise you're going to potentially have 3 very small courses at each of the elementaries. And I'm not sure that's what you're envisioning, Kate.
I'm giving you no particular vision. I'm more of giving like a priority and looking for a long-term kind of strategy with this. So
all right,
in terms of just putting together some options, do you think it would be reasonable to be able to do that for the July school committee meeting or maybe August?
Yeah. Okay. I might even be able to have some preliminary thoughts for next week. I mean, that's completely possible to talk about.
Look, anecdotally, I think it'd be great if they all got bused to one school and had chorus together, because that's one way for people to get to know each other before they get to the middle school.
That would
anecdotally, I think that's lovely too, but logistically, having room on a bus and having time on the run and blah, blah, blah is a whole other problem.
Yeah.
So that's, but if you folks want me to explore the option of having a stipend chorus after school for students, that We don't currently have an after-school bus for the elementary. It's middle school and high school. So that would be something that would have to be considered. If in fact they get transported to one location. It's just a factor. I will happily look into options and see what, if anything, is reasonable to think about by next week. And if it's not, Kate, then yes, definitely one of the summer meetings is absolutely reasonable for an option to talk about it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So I guess my question at this stage is, or my follow-up point is, we will still have to make a decision about Strings for Kids because Julie Carew, who runs it, has asked to do demonstrations in the elementary schools because they look for interested students now. I mean, you don't have to make a decision now. I'm just sharing. That's from a time standpoint, she had brought that up. The other thing that I did ask her about, because I'll be honest, I was hesitant to have her do demonstrations with the uncertainty of Strings for Kids. And she did say that if kids were interested, and we did not fund the program, they could refer students and families to other opportunities. I did not explore whether they were subsidized or the cost of anything at all, because I just want to share. She did mention that, they could refer families to other options if the school committee did not fund Strings for Kids.
Then I think that's something we need to bring up with the full vote of us.
Anything else?
I'm good.
I ask you a bunch of line item questions now that I feel like we're done with music.
I think so.
We've got just keeping us in line with our time. We've got 5 minutes left, Kate, just giving you a heads up. Actually 6.
6.
Yeah. Okay.
The luxury. Okay.
I'm sorry. Did we have a given end time for this meeting?
It's an hour long.
Is that what was posted?
I'm looking right now. No, it just says until 10 a.m. or it just says starting at 10.
Starting at 10. Okay, Kate, I might have Andy. I might tag Andy in to answer line item questions, but
yeah,
between the two of us, we'll get it.
That's fine.
Right.
Okay. I have so many. Now I have to choose. Okay. Maybe I'll just skip down to this one. I noticed that instructional supplies are down at every school except for Newton.
Correct.
So that's a bunch of lines, and I'm just wondering what supplies would we not be buying?
Well, it's so I can tell you at Newton, prior to her retirement, Mel Goodwin had purchased a lot of instructional supplies, and Darlene has not used them all. So she felt like she put in a request for supplies that was less than last year to begin with. And then it's just making different choices, I guess I would say, in terms of it would be ensuring that people are utilizing everything that they've stashed in their closets. It's also potentially getting, and I'm not being flip when I talk about this stuff, like we have millions of Post-it notes that say Greenfield Public Schools with the old address on them. So like ensuring people use those before we order more Post-it notes, or we just get yellow Post-it notes and not various colors. It might just be being very strategic about what we order.
Okay. So I guess I didn't I'm not sure then what qualifies as instructional supplies versus other kinds of supplies that are in the budget.
So there's generally two lines, instructional supplies and office supplies. So instructional supplies, this is how I think of it, is anything the kids use in the classroom or that would be used instructionally in the classroom. Office supplies are generally not being fresh, like office stuff, like photocopy
Post-it,
paper.
right. Wouldn't Post-it notes be general supplies then, like office supplies?
It
Could be both. It really could be both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 6 of 1. I mean, at the end of the day, the principals do have the ability to transfer money between those lines. So
Right. Okay. So there's nothing that we've invested in already that we're not going to buy anymore. This is just reducing.
we're not getting rid of any of we're not getting rid
If
of
I can say,
any of our
what I
instructional.
would, if I
Go
may,
ahead.
what has been done with, is that we've given the principals, administrators, historical actual data for all their lines. And then Christine has told them to go back and look and see between what is that you have in closets for your inventory, and then going forward to then, align your budget requests with those types of things, the trend analysis, as well as what you currently have in your inventory. And, these reductions are being made with, I say, a level of comfort that nobody is going to go without.
Okay, thank you. I notice on line 27, the reduction in para educators for kindergarten. Does that mean one less para for kindergarten at Federal Street?
Andy, do you want to answer?
I'm gonna have to.
I have a delay, so I know I've talked over people, but I have a delay with sound on my computer for some reason.
If you give me a second. Oh, we had put in the budget for 23 the potential for a placeholder that is not needed.
Okay, so that's not a position that's being
Correct.
lost.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. There were a few lines that were kind of similar, or had a similar issue that I had questions about, line 46, line 66. I think there's another one that are kind of similar where the difference in the local looks really big, but if you look at the difference in all funds, it's actually a much smaller percent increase. So is that because we were using one-time funds for those things for this year and they will be in the local next year? Is that what that's reflecting?
Yes.
So basically the actual increases there are just the contract raises.
Steps and columns over the 2 years, correct? You have to remember that this is 2 years worth of raises being caught up, correct?
Right, thank you. All right. Could you look at lines 90 and 91 and just explain what those expenses are? Those are like maintenance and equipment that are much larger than.
Those are expenses that Eric has, and Christine, you can jump into, but that Eric has, I'm going to say, quote unquote, discovered that both from the city has, in a sense, committed on our behalf that we have never budgeted for and need to budget for, so that we're adequately capturing what it is that they're doing on our behalf. There's some coordination that needs to occur between the city and the school because we're finding these surprises more often than not, and despite our requests from them to make sure they check with us first.
Right. That's frustrating.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's what both of those are. So there's several
okay.
contracts that we have been, told that we have that we had not budgeted for, or we're unaware that we should have been budgeting for. Either way, we're capturing this now based on what Eric has been
Right.
discovering with working with George.
Right. Okay. So it's under the central office line, but are those actually for things at various school buildings in the
Yes, it
district?
could be. Yes, that would be district wide, correct. And
Yeah. Okay. I wondered about that because the similar lines for the individual buildings seem like really small to me.
correct,
I don't know.
right.
It seems like we would spend a
It
lot more
allows
on equipment, a
when
couple
when time
$1,000.
comes to report to the Department of Ed, we don't report maintenance costs by school. It is one total. Now, there's some, when time comes, say if we were to ever do a building project or a renovation project, we would need to know those costs, but by putting it in this central, it allows Eric that flexibility to, put it where he sees fit.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. We still have line items for
Correct.
equipment and maintenance in the individual schools though,
Correct.
but they're really small. Okay, well I have to say that's really frustrating then on the city side to have an expenditure line where you're expecting $1,500 and then as it turns out you actually need to pay 28,000.
I think some of this is just a transition between how Andy and Eric and I manage a budget versus how prior administration addressed the budget.
Yeah.
And we want to be very cognizant of all of the things that we're fiscally responsible for. And this was Eric's first, he came in after the start of last year. And so he's had the opportunity to really work closely with George to make sure that we're accounting for the things that ultimately we're fiscally responsible for.
Yeah. Well, obviously that makes sense because, if you put those two together, it's almost $50,000 difference, from what we were expecting, which in the grand scheme of the school budget is relatively small, but still we're sitting here struggling over things like strings for kids. So yes, we need to know what our actual.
Yeah. And, it's been helpful, in terms of organization that the city does a service contract on behalf of the schools and the city for shared things. But, Eric very much wants to, and I appreciate and agree with this, he very much wants to reflect that in our expenditures, our portion of those service contracts. So I think we're in a much better place in terms of getting ourselves organized with our contribution to these service contracts. So I think,
I hope it will continue and stay that way.
Yeah, I think so.
Lines 30 and 109 are for building monitors. Are we getting additional building monitors at Newton and the middle school? Is that what that is?
Those are moving them where they really belong. They were put in various paraprofessional lines.
Ah, okay.
So
I get you. I was curious about the athletic supplies in line 113. What are we buying with that?
Athletic supplies, that is, I'm making generalizations. I see this is the middle school line, but there's a high school line as well. Softballs, baseballs, new bats, bases, chalk for the lines, could be volleyball netting, could be basketballs, anything. Basically, if it's needed to run a sport, we have to buy it.
Right. I just noticed there was a 14,000 increase in that line. So I wondered if we were buying something special.
No, I think, Mike's been conservative in replacing things. And, we've talked about that he needs to budget for the, the actual cost. The other piece is that, we've utilized the Greenfield Education Foundation a lot to support our athletic program needs. in the past. They've been very generous, which is wonderful, but we want to also make sure that we're accounting for the costs to run our athletic program. And some of the athletic supplies are just going up in cost.
Okay.
Nothing fancy though.
Okay. On line 51, that 166,000 is zeroed out for integrated arts at Four Corners. What's the story there?
We moved the integrated arts teachers. They're basically just captured under the other two elementary schools.
Okay.
We still have all the staff.
Okay. On 115 and also, line 115 is also zeroed out, which is middle school library periodicals. And I noticed there was also a $3,000 cut to periodicals at the GHS library. So are we not having periodicals anymore at the GMS library? And what are we not going to be getting at GHS as well?
I don't know. Derek, when we went through the budget reductions, he felt that was a line that could be reduced, and that would be his, at the end of the day, it would be between him and the library media specialist to decide what changes get made in terms of what items are purchased or not. Again, at the end of the day, he can transfer within lines of his department budget. So ultimately, it might not be periodicals that got cut. It could be something else, but that's what he felt was a reasonable reduction at this point.
Okay. On line 125, in terms of the GHS teaching staff, obviously that reflects step raises and contract increases. But we had talked previously about potential cuts related to certain electives, and is there a loss of any teachers in that line, or no?
Where are we? GHS teaching. I don't know, Andy. I mean, ultimately, the reductions in teaching staff are reflected. I mean, they ultimately would be reflected. They're on the cut list, but Andy, can you tell? I think we did take the reductions of those two positions when we built this budget.
I will, but this is another one of the things where we're trying to clean up the fact that technically for DESE reporting purposes, electives, there is no differentiation between electives and teaching staff. So you need to add that $78,000 2 lines below to show. Plus, in addition, we are using, this is where we're assigning the 391 out of school choice to that. So, when you look and see from the all funds to the all funds, there are, I'd say, an expected increase for the personnel that are there. So I will have to check and see as far as actual reductions.
Well, I mean, really what I'm asking about is the positions that we had previously floated cutting, which included teachers for electives at the high school and the middle school Spanish teachers. So are those
they're
going,
cut.
those are all cut?
Yes.
Yeah, they're cut. I mean, again, the committee can put them back, but in this budget, this reflects the administrative suggestions for the school committee in their entirety, which includes those positions being cut.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking through my note here.
I will share, for the sake of, I don't know, Kate, if you had any particular thoughts about the elective teachers, but the two teachers that would have been affected at the high school are employed, one with us and one not with us. So the people, if that's one of the concerns that you had, are employed. So if the committee were to reinstate either of those positions, we would have to look for staff.
Well, the people behind the numbers always are on my heart, but on a, you know,
Yeah, the business
on a actual impact level, I understand cutting those two positions. I do think we need to offer, you know, robust, well-rounded electives at GHS in order to attract and retain students. So that's important to the district. But you know, I understand going by enrollment in these classes. I would be I'm much more concerned about losing our middle school Spanish teacher. That on multiple levels. I worry about not offering any foreign language instruction until high school. That seems very non-competitive in terms of enrollment. And also we, on a social level, I feel that a lot of our students probably benefit from having this individual there at Greenfield Middle School, and I'm concerned about the more subtle, unspoken kind of effect of not having a Spanish teacher anymore. Not that I think I don't necessarily think that offering Spanish in the Unified Arts rotation for only 6 weeks in the year is really effective in terms of learning Spanish, but I think yeah, so it really sit well with me to lose that position.
Well, that's what the middle school, I mean, to be truthful, that's what the middle school uses the electives for, is we need the rotation to provide prep time for our classroom teachers. So, and if we were to offer Spanish as a full year course, it would be for a very limited number of students, and then they would be limited in getting any of their other required electives, like PE.
Yeah, I get the constraints. I'm just saying on a practical level, probably it's hard to learn and then retain a language if you only study it for 6 weeks out of the year. So
yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah, I feel really worried about that particular position going away. Susan, thoughts?
I worry about any position going away. I don't know.
You know, obviously we'll put in whatever the committee wants, and then you'll just have to let us know what else you want, like what the offset would be.
Yeah, I think talking about music is important for the full committee. I think for myself, I am more inclined to leave the rest of it to the superintendent's discretion, only because, you know, we're sort of having philosophical discussions, and which is great, and I'm not trying to undermine that at all, but the superintendent and everyone in the district are the people who have to live with the decisions that we make every day. And so if she's telling us that there aren't people signing up for electives, that means they're not signing up for the electives. And you know, it's also, if you build it, they'll come kind of thing, chicken and egg, and all of the other metaphors that I can come up with. So I don't know where I'm going. I think that the superintendent has a better feel for what's going on. Kate, I understand your concerns. I share the same ones, but there is a reality that we have to deal with as well. I don't know.
If I may, in terms of, you know, the administrative perspective on some of these conversations about, you know, we have to offer certain electives, as you folks know. So we need to make sure those are in place. We need to make sure that we provide contractually required preparation periods for all of our classroom, you know, all of our Unit A staff. And then after that, if we're to prioritize staffing, and some members of the school committee were part of the strategic planning, which you'll all see on Wednesday. I don't think anyone will be shocked to hear that one of the highest priorities is our core instruction. So, you know, as we have administrative conversations, some of the focus comes in that if we were to have the ability to add positions, you know, what would they be? And when we're looking at federal and the middle school and their level of performance, you know, the middle schools was in the bottom 1% of Title I schools in the state in terms of accountability data for academic performance. So, you know, when we have those conversations with Michelle, her urgency is around our core academic instruction. So, you know, that again, I'm not saying anything you folks don't already know very well, that when we look at the financial constraints that we have, and talk about where we would prioritize our resources, we need to look at the parts that are on fire, and that's sort of our core instruction. But that said, whatever the committee ends up wanting to do, obviously we will put into the budget. We will just need to talk about where the offset is. And the more people we fund in the grant, the more vulnerable people we have for 25.
Okay. On 179, I think this is a Karen question. Going from 282 to 100,000, what is that? Is that because of a larger initial cost for CKLA and then a lower ongoing cost, or what is
Andy,
that?
could you scroll down, please? Sorry, Kate, I didn't have it up on my own computer.
That's okay.
Hold on, Karen, I can tell you. Oh, 185. That's the line you said, right, Kate? 185.
179. 179.
Oh, 179. I don't know where I got 185, but all right. 179. It was instructional supplies district wide. FY23 was 282.
Yeah, and
now
FY24
we're
is 100.
suggesting 100,000 out of grants.
I think, Kate, if I'm recalling, and maybe Christine in our conversations, we revamped and streamlined a lot of what we weren't using. In the past, we had a lot of funding for little piecemeal things that were happening in different buildings, if that's a way to describe it. And when my position started weeding through what we are supposed to be using versus what teachers were electing to use, and then trying to streamline curriculums and resources, we could eliminate some of the costs in that line.
Okay.
Yep, Karen, I agree with you.
That is some excellent streamlining. Little question on 186 in terms of tutors for students who need a tutor who speaks another language. Do we need to increase this in order to provide any services in Haitian Creole, given the new students coming in?
So there are contracted services that we're actually using right now for any translation. There are 2 companies that we use. So maybe, but on the other hand, I do not know at this point how long any of our students might be with us,
Right.
but certainly it's potential, Kate, but I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess right now what that could look like. But there is potential. But Janet does budget in her budget for like part of our IEP program costs is there is a module that allows for translation of any of the special education paperwork through that. So,
Right.
we account for that. But yeah, it's possible.
Okay. On line 190, it says professional services other, and that's going up quite a bit. What is that?
That's part of athletics. And what that is that in past years, the athletic program has utilized some weight room training, supervision, and also folks on the sidelines. MIAA requires at some games that we have someone to function as an athletic trainer. There's levels of credential of people that can serve that role. And we're just reflecting the costs of that in the budget.
Okay.
Previously, the athletic revolving account had covered some of these or those that there are some new things, but if you look at the monthly reports, the revolving account isn't covering anywhere near what it has in the past.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I just have, I think, 2 or 3 other questions. So on line 234, which is for contracted evaluations for special education.
Yep.
We're spending an awful lot of money on that because we do not have any school psychologists at the moment.
Correct.
This is kind of related to line 166, which is for the school psychologists. Presently, that's budgeted at 169, which I think is because the starting salary is considerably lower than what was being paid to the 2 who retired. Am I off base on that?
Nope. We budget for the salaries. We use an average starting salary when we budget for vacant positions. But at this point, we are contracting, and I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear we're still behind. So we're anticipating the need to continue to have some additional help in getting all the evals caught up. But we do have one hire for next year, and we're continuing to post for additional.
Okay. And what's budgeted there on 166? Is that for 2 positions?
You said it's the 169?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, at least 2, depending their level of credential. We had 2 retirees that both had their doctorates. So we do anticipate a little bit higher for this professional position.
Right. Well, a psychologist is a highly educated and trained person. So, we have to.
But they don't have to have their doctorate to be a school psych. So we just had 2 that did have their doctorates.
Right. Okay. On 243, that's the special education out of district tuitions. Which, if you add the following lines up together, of course, that's a hefty increase, and that's because of the 14% tuition increase given by the state.
And a reflection of additional students out of district.
Okay. So this isn't like an hour budget question, but I was just wondering if you have been told anything by anybody at the state level about relief for this?
Not really. So Andy, you nod or shake, but the last that I know, there's additional funds that were included in the governor's version of the budget, but the last information I had was that it was still potentially available to districts using a formula that would not allow us to recapture the 12%. Like districts generally budget 2%. So there was conversation about allowing districts to recapture that 12% that wouldn't have been anticipated. But the last informal, I guess, information I had was that the formula being suggested for reimbursement would not necessarily allow districts to capture all of that back. Andy, do you know anything different than what I just said? Okay,
so basically we might be able to capture something more than 2%, but probably less than 12%. Is that what I gathered from what you just said?
Yeah, somewhere in the middle seems hopeful.
Okay.
Hopeful.
Okay.
You know, they've also included additional funds. The governor included additional funds for circuit breaker reimbursement, but you know, we'll need to just see. I know there was a final vote from someone. I apologize, I've lost count whether it's the entirety, it's been approved across the board, or if it's just the House or just the Senate, or where that is. But there was additional funding for circuit breaker. Whether or not that has any significant impact on us at the end of the day, I won't know until the submission's done.
Right. Okay. And just a couple of tiny little things at the end. 259 seems to have a really big, it's small in the scheme of the budget, but it's a very big increase to disposal costs. Why?
We had to get bigger dumpsters.
Oh.
That was an easy one. We actually had to get bigger dumpsters.
Okay. And then the last one, 272, that's reduced from 49 to 25,000 for crossing guards. Are we just not going to have as many crossing guards, or what's the deal there?
Looking at the historical trends and discussing with Jake, it looks like that line has been, I'm going to say, somewhat overly budgeted. So we're bringing it down more towards the trends of what it is that's been spent.
Okay. Okay, thank you for answering my innumerable questions. It was only 29 extra minutes, Susan.
That's all right.
Good job, Kate. I am fresh out. Kate has covered any question that I would have. And so unless there's any information to be shared otherwise, I think I want to close the meeting.
Can I just ask one question for clarification?
Sure.
Is there anything besides the music option, the chorus option, is there anything that you two as the subcommittee are expecting me to have information about for Wednesday?
No, Andy, though, so the chair has asked that we actually, you know, let me give you a call directly about what the chair has asked for, because it's not on our agenda and I don't want to potentially violate any open meeting law. Christine, you.
I think it would be, I think when we get to next Wednesday's meeting, if you have anything to share in terms of options for preserving and enhancing the music program in elementary, understanding that you'll probably need more time to flesh that out, that would be great. And also I would like to hear and understand some alternatives in terms of what might be moved or changed to preserve the middle school Spanish.
So you want us to give you additional cuts to consider?
To consider, yeah, just options.
I think I would put back some of the things that we restored, like the 504 coordinator, the ETL full-time.
Okay, I would like to air that out for the general public on Wednesday.
Of course. And I'll revisit the schedule with Michelle and see if, but I know that administratively, we had a lot of conversations about the list. I'm sure you can imagine that.
Yeah.
But yep. Okay. I will do some investigation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
All right, so I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And so, Member Ekstrom, yes. Member Johnson-Masad has had to leave the meeting. Member Martini?
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Have a good day.